Hello, hello, hello. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. How are we doing? As you know, this is the place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. And a lot has been going on around the world of recent, and what has been taking up almost all the attention is the Israeli-Iranian war, right? This is the conflict that obviously was started by Israel, why Israel preemptively bombing Iran. The thing about language that I've seen with what the West does with language is that it's used to whitewash actions of the West as being legitimate, while actions of other people is not legitimate, is seen as something else. So if Iran had bombed Israel, because obviously Israel is as much a threat to Iran as Iran is a threat to Israel. If Iran had done that, it would have been termed a terrorist attack. But when Israel does that, in a bid to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, first of all, Iran is an independent country. It's not Israel's business to tell Iran what to do. But aside that, the fact that Netanyahu has been saying Iran is 2 weeks away from getting a nuclear weapon for 30 years. For 30 years, someone has to be lying, or the Iranians are so mentally slow that for 30 years they've been 2 weeks away from getting this weapon and they somehow could not even get it. It's You can see that someone is lying. Apart from all of that, Iran has put its nuclear programs under international monitoring. Iran was negotiating with the US on this, and the US strung Iran along, just giving them this false sense of security that nothing was going to happen to them. And then how, uh, how dishonorable do you have to be? And these people have the guts to say that it's the Iranian regime that is uh, genocidal, that is suicidal. Makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, today let's talk about Tucker Carlson and the interview that I had with Ted Cruz, which still boils down to all this conversation surrounding Israel. And it just showed the ignorance. Apart from the ignorance, it exposed so many things about US politicians when it comes to Israel. And Tucker Carlson, I have no love for that man. But you know what they say about a broken clock, that a broken clock can be right at most twice in a day. It seemed that Tucker Carlson somehow found a way to be right one one full day, like a 24-hour day, because he just kept, just as Iran is pounding Israel, he just kept pounding Ted Cruz with these questions. So react to I'm going to react to that conversation that they had, to that interview that Tucker Carlson had with Ted Cruz, which just exposes a whole lot of things. So let's get into it.
Senator, thank you very much for spending the time to have this conversation.
It's good to be with you.
So you've come out for regime change in Iran, as distinct just from taking out the nuclear sites. What does regime change look like in Iran?
Somebody else in charge.
How do you get there?
Very smugly, do you say how he just says it? Somebody else in charge. What right does the US have to determine that the leader of a free country has to go? Now, this is not the people of that country saying somebody else has to take a charge. Just imagine if Iran had said, you know what, the US president has to go. I mean, Trump has been a disaster for the world. He has been a disaster for the people of the US. Supposing Iran says that the US president has to go, that would be a declaration of war. But the US can simply just sit down comfortably and says it's time for the government of a sovereign nation to go. The people have no inputs whatsoever.
Look, that ultimately has to be a popular uprising from the people. And it's not a complicated question. Is America better off with a country that has a leader who hates us and wants to kill us, or to have a country with a leader who likes us and wants to be friends with us?
And definitely the latter is better.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so that's not a complicated statement. Look, I believe you look across the world when you have countries that have dictators that are viciously anti-America. Venezuela, Maduro hates us. Would we be better off with Maduro out of power? Absolutely. I want our enemies out of power and I want our friends in power.
So what has the those enemies that he just mentioned, what have they done to harm the US? In what way have they harmed you? You can be enemies with someone and you guys live your lives, you live your parallel lives. They go their way, you go your way. Why do they have to die? Just because why why don't you flip it the other way? Why don't you die so that they can live on? What makes you think that you are the right person? What makes you think that you have the right to live and exist because someone else is your enemy? They haven't done anything to jeopardize your safety or your security. They haven't attacked you in any way. The US has been in a perpetual state of war since its inception. Iran hasn't invaded any country in what, 2 centuries? So who is the greater threat here? Maduro hasn't invaded the US. Maduro hasn't attacked the US. So just because someone doesn't like the US is enough for the US to pass a death sentence on them makes no sense.
That I could not agree more. The question is, how do you get there?
Of course.
And we've been trying to kill Maduro for quite some time. We have troops
Been trying to kill the president of an independent nation. And Tucker just says it like that.
there. As you
I
know.
don't know that we've been trying to kill Maduro.
We have.
Ah.
And I think you know that. And
I don't know that.
Okay, well, as a statement of fact, we have. So
we do have massive sanctions. We tried to pressure him out of office.
yeah,
I'm
there's all
not,
kinds
not
of
aware
stuff.
of efforts.
I'm just saying there's a lot of pressure coming from various parts of the U.S. government on that government, and it's still there.
Yeah.
Same.
Use PDF Filler to edit documents anytime, anywhere, from any device. Add text.
Country of our ancestors, Cuba. 1959. We've been working on that. Hasn't worked. So it's. I think we both agree it's hard to do.
It absolutely is hard. And look, I think you're reasonable to ask, how do we produce that? And I think there's a distinction between what your objective is and the means to get it. There are all sorts of things I would say we would be better off. We'd be better off in China without Xi there. Should we invade China and topple Xi? Of course not.
Better off with no national debt.
There are lots of things.
Totally.
But it's good to say, all right, what are our objectives?
Right.
And so with the
How does taking out Xi solve the national debt of the US? Yeah, this is just going to be an idiot's contest.
Ayatollah in Iran saying you're for regime change, I don't view as complicated. I mean, the guy literally leads mobs chanting death to America.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not good.
Yeah, that's free speech, right? Isn't that a thing in the US? Words. What is this thing that conservatives like to say? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. So, death to America. Let's say that's, of course, that's what they're saying. But have they attacked America? Have they done anything physically to harm America? Iran is not stupid, they're not suicidal. Yes, of course, they don't like America for obvious reasons, right? But it would be a death wish for Iran to, in any way, provoke America by directly attacking America. They are not suicidal and they're not going to do that. So let them with their nonsense rhetoric. Is that enough for you to want to kill them? I'm sure the sentiment that you are expressing, but Ted Cruz and even America as a foreign policy, the foreign policy that America has towards Iran is essentially one of death to Iran. In fact, America has actually killed the Iranians. They killed Qasem Soleimani in, I think, Syria or some. That's a member of the Iranian government. Israel, with the backing of the US, just killed leaders of the Iranian government. Iran hasn't done any of that. Yeah, but yeah, it's Iran is the evil one. They are do you know what it means that an Islamist government is better in terms of has more moral rights or has more morality than the US government? Like, it should not even be possible that a government that is repressive of its people, of the Iranian people, should be the much more moral and logical one in international affairs. But that's the upside down world that we're living in currently, where the US and Israel they aggress on people as if it's their right. They have the sole right to do that. Nobody else has the right to do any of that.
Definitely not good. But the reason I think it's important to get a little more detailed about how that might happen
Sure.
is because there's military action in progress, which we're supporting. And the president has said clearly, including last night, that he is focused on eliminating the capacity of the Iranian government
Yep.
to produce nuclear weapons. You are saying we need to use military force to effect regime change.
I have not said that.
Oh, I must have.
No,
misread
I
what you
have
said.
not said that once.
Okay.
I don't think we need to use military force to do regime change. I said I support it. I would like to see it happen. You asked me how should it happen? A popular uprising. What I've advocated for. All right, let's step back a second. You and I, we've known each other a long time. I would say we agree on about 80% of the things on Earth.
For sure.
And there are a lot of things, and we can get into the nitty-gritty of foreign policy as much as you want. There are a lot of things on which you and I agree, not just a little bit, but violently.
I totally agree. I was rooting for you in your last campaign, for sure.
Well,
What's this? Is this like, when are they going to finally kiss each other? I mean, look at the passionate way in which Tucker Carlson is looking at Ted Cruz by just saying we agree on this, we agree on that.
thank you. Look, you have been heroic on the
Yeah,
border.
that's right.
You've been one of the clearest and best voices in the whole country on securing the border and the absolute crisis we're facing. And in Texas, I see it and live it every day. In COVID, in fact, you may recall,
Dude, get to the damn point. Stop flattering this man. Get to the point.
in the middle of the COVID lockdown, I was out walking my dog when the whole world was shut down and we were living in lunatic times. And I called you and said, Tucker, your nightly monologues are the single best thing on television. Like
Thanks.
I watch them like an injection of crack. Okay, I'm mixing my metaphor because you don't inject crack, but you get what I'm
Good
saying.
try.
No, I mean, you were standing up and speaking like, what the hell are we doing in a way that we desperately, desperately needed? And so whether it's securing the border, whether it's the insanity of COVID lockdowns and the vaccine mandates, whether it is the Second Amendment or the First Amendment, you and I agree on a ton of stuff. The 20% where we disagree, I do think is meaningful. And it's mostly in the foreign policy space. And what I would say, if you'll allow me to get a little theoretical, and then I'm happy to get specific.
Yes.
You don't have burnout. It's called cortisol addiction. Waking up at 3 a.m., unable.
For a long time, people had perceived two different poles of Republican foreign policy. There have been interventionists, and those have been people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham and George W. Bush. And there have been isolationists. And the most prominent of those have been Ron Paul and Rand Paul, and there are others. And people perceive those are the two choices. You got to be one or the other. I've always thought both were wrong. I don't agree with either one. The way I view my own foreign policy.
I'm with you, by the way, for whatever it's worth. I agree with you.
Okay, good.
I don't know who set up that binary, but there are lots of choices, actually.
I mean, people sort of naturally fall into, I think they want to classify people and they're like, okay, you're one or the other and you got to be all or nothing. And the interventionists, it seems, have never seen a country they didn't want to invade. And that doesn't make any sense to me. And the isolationists, I think, don't take the threats to America seriously. And I think that's naive and it doesn't work. And so my view, I consider myself a third point on the triangle. And what I describe that as is that I am a non-interventionist hawk, which sounds a little weird, but what do I mean by that? I mean the central touch point for U.S. foreign policy and for any question of military intervention should be the vital national security interest of the United States. How does this make America safer? How does this protect Americans? If it does, we should be strong. And actually, another way of conceiving what I'm saying, I'm speaking theoretically, but Reagan referred to it as peace through strength. And actually, I think Donald Trump's foreign policy is very much what I'm describing, a non-interventionist hawk, where he understands that, and I think this is historically true, the best way to avoid war is being strong. That weakness and isolationism, I think, encourages war. So
But if that's the best way to avoid war, Trump is failing horribly at that because his rhetoric, come this second 16, and the actions that he's taking has been quite different. This shows a Trump that is ready and wants to go to war. Trump had been bombing Yemen until he got his ass kicked, losing jets and drones, and had to cut a deal with Yemen. He talked about invading Greenland, talked about annexing Canada. He's talked about attacking. He very, very publicly supported Israel's attack on Iran, claiming we now have control over the skies of Iran and Tehran and so on and so forth. So this is just hogwash, saying that Trump is a non-interventionist hawk. It's not true.
Oh, going back to regime change, where you started in Iran.
So just to make, I don't think I disagree with anything you've said. So we may not be that far apart, really, because you said that the single criterion for making decisions about America's foreign policy is America's national interest.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah. Which is also America first. That's another way of putting that as well.
I think it's the definition of it.
Yeah.
It's hardly breaking news. The U.S. dollar has been gravely devalued.
And when they took him out, that power base was supporting Assad. And that ultimately, in Bibi's analysis, removed the support for
today.
The question is, are we watching that now?
So I think we are. And from what you've said publicly, I think on Iran in particular, you and I disagree. And all right, let me contrast it when Obama was president. When Obama was president, you remember he talked about wanting to have military action against Syria.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I tried to keep an open mind to it. I said, okay, let me listen to the commander in chief, describe to me how this is in America's interest and what your plan is. And Bashar Assad was a bad guy. He was killing his own citizens and he had chemical weapons that were very dangerous. I could conceive of a commander in chief laying out a plan for, okay, we're going to go in and say, grab the chemical weapons and leave. Like I could see that.
But the funny thing with all this, there is a very familiar pattern with the US and Israel's intervention in the Middle East. It's not to bring peace, it's not to bring democracy, it's not to bring prosperity, it's to weaken and to balkanize all these states, to essentially turn them into failed states. That's what they did with Iraq. That's what they did with Libya. That's what they did with Syria. And that's what they're trying to do with Iran. What this means is that essentially there is no effective opposition to Israel in the Middle East. Because once you have taken away the political structure, the cohesive political structure, yeah, they might be authoritarian, but that's how that part of the world functions. Even Israel itself is an authoritarian regime. If Israel decides to run a true democracy in that region today, it might not even survive. So that's the way business is done in the Middle East. So what these guys, what the US and Israel they're doing is they're trying, because they know, of course, they're Arabs, they are Turks, they are different ethnic groups in those places. They are competing interests, they're Shias, they're Sunnis. Break the cohesive political structure down and have so many factions, so many little factions here and there that are not strong enough to provide any counter to whatever Israel is going to be doing to the Palestinians, because ultimately they want to kick out all the Palestinians and take their land. That's the playbook here. This is not in any way in America's best interest, because these people are not crazy to attack America. It's all about Israel. It's all about Israel's interest, not America's interest. America is thousands of miles away. They have... Okay.
If there was a real threat to America and there was a plan to prevent that, I could see supporting that. So I wanted to hear what he had to say. And I listened both in classified briefings and public questioning. And number one, their public defense of it was incoherent. So John Kerry said, we're going to engage in an unbelievably small strike. I think that's a quote. I'm like, okay, and to do what? At the time, there were 9 major rebel Islamic groups in Syria. I'm like, okay, I agree, Bashar Assad's a bad guy. You topple him. And one of the 9 other groups...
So maybe we just go to the interesting spot where they disagreed, because I saw some... all right, so this is... No, I don't want to talk about this. How much money is the US sending to Israel? Okay, let's do this.
To our country, the dollars spent, the aid packages to Ukraine to pay the retirement of civil servants in a country that we have nothing to do with, the endless support for Israel, very expensive. When people are literally buying groceries on credit in the United States, can you feel like it's nothing against Ukraine or Israel or any other country?
All right, let's stop. You said the support for Israel very expensive. How much support do we give to Israel?
Well, you tell me. You vote for it.
Yeah, it's about $3 billion a year is the military assistance.
Is that the only assistance?
Yeah, we just have military assistance. Israel does not have additional assistance. There's an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, and it's $3 billion a year.
So what is it costing to support the bombing campaign to protect Israel right now from Iran?
So I don't know right now, but I'll tell you this. Let's go back to the touchstone on foreign policy, American interest. Our support, our military support for Israel is massively in America's national security interest.
What does it cost?
It benefits us enormously.
Well, before we can make independent judgments about whether or not that's true, and I'm certainly open to it, I think we need to know what it costs. So what's the annual cost of defending Israel? Do you know?
$3 billion a year.
No, that's the aid. But I mean, the cost of the weapons, for example, the cost of U.S. personnel there, the cost of moving ships to the region, which we're doing right now, the cost of moving tankers to the region, all of that. Do we know what the cost is?
So look, the last week, I don't know. And there's some lag when the administration, under the Constitution, the commander.
Also add the cost of losing drones, the cost of losing military planes in the ocean. Add those to it.
In chief has control of the armed forces. And so President Trump has made some decisions that we'll know the cost over time, but I don't know the last week. I don't have visibility on that. The annual cost is $3 billion. It's a 10-year memorandum of understanding, and that's the principal driver of the cost. But let me make a point. We get massive benefits from Israel. Israel shares the Mossad is one of the best intelligence sources on the planet. The enemies of Israel, the people who hate Israel, they all hate us. It's almost a perfect overlap. And so if we tried to recreate, if we're just trying to defend America, we tried to recreate the national security benefits of our alliance with Israel, it would cost, I don't know, $30 billion, $300 billion.
So can you elaborate? And again, I'm going into this as someone who's
always. Do you want to know why they hate you? It's because of Israel. They would really have no reason to hate you if you are not imposing an imperialist policy in the Middle East in support of Israel. They really wouldn't have any reason to hate you. I mean, do they hate China? Do they hate Russia? Do they even hate Britain as much as they hate the US and America and Israel? So every action, there is a reaction. People are not crazy. People are not insane. Even people that look seemingly insane, there is a rationale. There's a rationality behind their actions. And when people in the Middle East, when they are expressing hate for America, it's not for no reason. It's not because they just hate democracy. It's not because they just hate Christians. No, that's not it. There might be some part of that, but I think it's insignificant. It mostly has to do with politics. It mostly has to do with US policies in those regions. It mostly has to do with how the US is supporting Israel in its genocidal actions, its colonialist actions, its expansionist aims in the Middle East. That is it. They have absolutely no other reason to hate the US if you take away those things.
Always liked Israel and still does. But I also think at this point, given where we are, it's fair to ask rational questions about what the benefits are.
Good.
So does Mossad share all of its intelligence with us?
Oh, probably not, but they share a lot.
Really?
We don't share all of our intelligence with them, but we share a lot. It's a close alliance.
Do they spy domestically in the United States?
Oh, they probably do, and we do as well. And friends and allies spy on each other. And I assume all of our allies spy on us.
And that's okay with you?
You know what? One of the things about being a conservative is that you're not naive and utopian. You don't think humans are all. Part of the reason socialism doesn't work is the mantra from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs doesn't work. As a conservative, I assume people act in their rational self-interest.
So it's conservative to pay people to spy on you?
It's conservative to recognize that human beings act in their own self-interest, and every one of our friends spies on us. And I'm not.
Do you like it? That's my question. I'm not asking whether they have motive to do it. Of course they do. I understand that. And
by the way,
I'm not mad at them. And you're an American lawmaker, so I just want to know. Hold on. I want to know your attitude. You said that you're guiding principle, in fact, the only principle, the only criterion.
I said guiding, the overwhelming. I wouldn't say only.
Is it in America's interest? Is it in America's interest for Israel to spy on us, including on the president?
It is in America's interest to be closely allied with Israel because we get huge benefits for it. And you want to see the clearest.
But I just want to stop on the spying for a second. That it takes place, as you know, and including on the president of the United States and several precedents. And I just want to know if that's okay and why is it okay? Wouldn't an American lawmaker say to a client state, you're not allowed to spy on us? I'm sorry. I know why you want to. I'm not mad at you, but you're not allowed to.
Sure.
And I don't care for it. I don't want to be spied on by you. It's kind of weird not to say that, but you don't seem able to say that.
Sure, I would say don't spy on us. They're going to anyway. And by the way, the Brits are, the Canadians are. Like, I don't think.
Well, I'm not for that at all. Okay. I think it's disgusting. But we don't actually pay their. We're not their most meaningful sponsor. We're not sort of paying for the operations of the British government.
I gotta say, and this is it's weird. We're talking about isolationists, the obsession with Israel. Why is Israel?
Oh, I don't think I'm obsessed with Israel.
Okay, but I think a lot of people are. And like the question, Israel spies.
I think this is where it starts getting really spicy. Yeah. We're getting into it.
Well, so does every other country. Why are you mad at Israel?
I guess. Oh no. I'm hardly the one who's. I've never taken money from the Israel lobby. Have you?
Taken money from the Israel
from AIPAC.
So AIPAC raises a lot of money for me, but it's actually a misnomer because the people who raise money are individuals. Right. So it's not the PAC itself, but they're individual members who believe in the American-Israeli friendship and relationship.
AIPAC a foreign lobby?
So you've taken money from AIPAC. What a roundabout way of saying yeah.
No, it's an American lobby. It's the AIPAC stands for the America-Israeli Political Action Committee.
What does it lobby for?
So, to be honest, not a whole lot effectively. Listen, I came into Congress 13 years ago with the stated intention of being the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate.
Right.
And I've worked every day to do that.
So you came into Congress to be an advocate for Israel. That's very revealing. Someone's political career is hinged on being an advocate for a foreign nation and one, albeit which spies on the U.S.
AIPAC, a lot of times, AIPAC, I wish were much more effective. Like there are folks online who are in the fever swamp of terrified of AIPAC, and AIPAC.
I'm not terrified of AIPAC at all. You're the one who seems a little uncomfortable when I'm asking.
No, not uncomfortable at all.
I'm just asking what AIPAC does. My understanding, having known a lot of people,
I can tell you.
So essentially, Ted Cruz is saying that he would have done this for free, but AIPAC is paying him. So what's the downside? He would have be advocating for Israel for free. That's what his political career is about. Going to the U.S. Congress to advocate for a foreign country.
Is that it lobbies on behalf of the Israeli government?
Wrong.
Oh, okay.
America has thousands of colleges and universities, and a lot of them, unfortunately, are based on economic.
No.
How much contact do you think AIPAC leaders have for the government of Israel?
No idea. I imagine some. I think the government of Israel is often frustrated with AIPAC because AIPAC's not nearly strong enough.
Do you think there's any coordination between the government of Israel and AIPAC?
Do they talk? Sure. If you're lobbying for more U.S.-Mexico trade, would you talk to people in the U.S. and Mexico and the government? Sure. Like if.
So I'm not mad about that. There are a million countries that lobby Washington. I like a lot of those countries, including Israel.
But AIPAC are Americans. They're not Israelis.
Hold on. There are tons of Americans who lobby on behalf of foreign governments. I know them. I'm related to some of them. I know how it works. I'm from here. So my question is not, is it outrageous that foreign governments lobby the United States? They all do, okay, including Israel. My only question is, why don't we admit that is what's happening? You're denying it, but it's true.
Yeah,
and
why aren't you're saying is false.
Why aren't they registered as a foreign lobby?
Because they're not.
They're
not. And
okay.
There's a fever swamp. Look,
it's not a fever swamp. These are very reasonable questions. And you've accused me of being obsessed with Israel, which I'm not.
I actually haven't. I've said
being feverish about it, which I'm not at all. I find it's a very tender spot when you ask it. And I don't know why.
So, Tucker, all right, let's go back. I was first elected to the Senate in 2012. I came in Obama's second term. And I actually saw AIPAC be badly wounded in a way they never came back from. And the second term is when Obama did the Iran nuclear deal. And the Iran nuclear deal, I think, was catastrophic. And AIPAC went all in lobbying against it.
Yeah.
And they failed. And I was the
How was that catastrophic? A deal that was supposed to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons is catastrophic. I didn't really understand. Isn't it the goal of Israel to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons? And wasn't that deal about making sure that Iran doesn't enrich to the point where they can get nuclear weapons? Israel's actions are so irrational. It's almost like they want conflict, they want destruction. It's so irrational. Poking everybody, attacking everybody, sabotaging deals that are supposed to curtail Iran, your supposed enemy.
leading opponent of the Iran nuclear
Oh, I know.
deal.
They definitely failed. Yes.
They failed. And what happened, the Obama White House told every Democrat, when I got here, there used to be real bipartisan support for Israel. That has largely disappeared. And it's the Obama nuclear deal that caused it, because the Obama White House told every Democrat, pick. You either stand with Israel or you're a Democrat and you stand with the Obama White House.
This is just bullshit. This is cap. I don't, as much as American politics, as much as American politicians disagree with each other, from what I've seen, there is one area in which they are unanimously aligned, and that is on the issue of Israel. I mean, Netanyahu gets more applause when he is addressing the US Congress than any American politician ever. When the Democrats were in power, when Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were in power, they were solidly behind Israel. Trump is in power now, solidly behind Israel. So it's hogwash to claim that that AIPAC is not effective. It's hogwash to claim that that's not true, that there is no bipartisan support for Israel. There is no issue affecting Americans that you have as much support for amongst American politicians as you have for the support for Israel. Nothing is even close.
White House. And almost every single Democrat member of Congress said, I'm a Democrat first, to hell with Israel. And then I watched as AIPAC, every one of those Democrats got reelected and AIPAC did nothing about it. And it dramatically reduced AIPAC's influence.
I agree. I watched it.
AIPAC was supposed to do something about Americans putting their country first. This is very revealing. Very, very revealing.
And by the way, I told AIPAC, I said, look, the analogy, if the NRA was supporting a bunch of politicians and cared about the Second Amendment, and you had politicians that vote to confiscate people's guns, and the NRA turned around and raised money for the people who voted to confiscate guns, you know what? No one would ever care what they said again.
So you're making the case that AIPAC is not as powerful as people say it is, and I completely agree with you. I've watched that, and I'm not making the case that AIPAC is all powerful and they're running everything and putting fluoride in the water. I'm not making that case at all, because that's not true. I'm only trying to get to the question of what AIPAC is, and I don't think you're being straightforward about it. AIPAC is lobbying on behalf of the interests of a foreign country, and they're not registered. And you're saying, no, that's not true. You're saying that they don't coordinate with the Israeli government.
Of course, I coordinate. They talk with them. I don't know what they do. I can
But
tell
why
you,
don't you care? Isn't it meaningful if a foreign government...
Hey, I talk with Israel all the time. I talk
course you do.
with
Of course you
foreign
do.
countries all the time.
But the law is, and a lot of people have been prosecuted under this law, that if you are lobbying on behalf of foreign government, you must register. That's it. It's really simple. And I don't know why, if I'm working for Malaysia or Qatar or Belgium, and I'm working on behalf of its government's interests through a group of Americans who are representing the friendship between those two nations, I have to register under the Foreign Agent Registration Act. And if I don't, I can go to jail. And people have gone to jail, including people I know.
Okay.
So I don't understand why.
Yeah, that's because America is owned by Israel. It's plain and simple. All the politicians are bought and paid for by Israel. They're not going to do that.
We don't just be honest and say they're lobbying on behalf of a foreign government. They're coordinating with the government. You know that that's true.
That is not only not true, that is false.
They're not coordinating with the Israeli government.
Do you know how AIPAC raises money?
What?
For elected officials, like what they do, like
It's irrelevant how they raise money. The point is, to what end are they raising that money? Is it American interests or Israeli interests? That's the point he's skirting around. He's refusing to address. He's refusing to answer the question. He's just dancing around, not giving anything, no specifics. He's throwing his hands up in the air like he doesn't know what AIPAC is or what AIPAC does. But he receives money from AIPAC. So, what exactly are you receiving those financial contributions, those financial support from APAC for? What do they do for you? What do they ask in return? They just like your face and decide to give you money?
Like what the actual mechanics is?
I get it. I mean, they go to people who are sympathetic to Israel and raise money and then send it to candidates who
wrong.
agree with them.
So what they'll do is, so in my last election, APAC endorsed me. And they'll host a fundraiser. And they'll host a
Well,
fundraiser.
of course, they endorse you. You're committed to supporting Israel. You're committed to being a voice for Israel. That's what your whole political career is about. You said as much. You went to Congress to defend Israel.
In Dallas or Houston or Atlanta or New York or LA. And they'll do a fundraiser and they'll get someone who will host it. And it's usually a business owner, lawyer, doctor, someone who hosts it. And you get typically at an APAC fundraiser, 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 people who live in that city,
right?
Who care about a strong U.S.-Israel relationship.
Yeah.
And if they have, 50 people, each of them writes $1,000 check and you raise $50,000.
Yeah, I've been to an APAC fundraiser. Okay. I know what it looks like.
But that is not, and by the way, there's no representative of the Israeli government there. You have, when you're in Dallas, you're meeting
such a
with
false and silly conversation. I know all this. The question is are APAC's goals shaped by the goals of the Israeli government to any extent?
Okay, that's
a really
different
simple
from
question.
lobbying on behalf of.
It's a simple question. Are APAC's goals shaped by the goals of the Israeli government? And I'm just going to ask you that question straightforwardly. And if you say no, I think we both know that's not true.
Okay, are they shaped by?
Are they coordinating with the Israeli government?
Are they talking with them? Yes. Is Israel directing them?
So what are you talking with them, but they're not coordinating with them? What's the difference?
I want to talk about FARA, the law on lobbying on behalf of someone.
Yeah.
It is, I hire you and you lobby on behalf of me. I direct you. Does Israel direct APAC? No, they are not lobbying on behalf of them. Do they care about them? Yes, but
or do you think that it's just interesting because what you're now describing?
How does he know? How does he know that Israel isn't paying APAC? That Israel did not hire them? How does he know?
Very defensive way, I will say, is foreign influence over our politics.
No,
and you began, and it's so transparently obvious to everybody. I don't know why you would be embarrassed of it. You've said that you are sincerely for Israel. I believe you. I don't think you have some weird agenda. You seem to be sincere.
By the way, Tucker, it's a very weird thing. The obsession with Israel, when we're talking about foreign countries,
it's hardly an obsession.
You're not talking about Chinese. You're not talking about Japanese. You're not talking about the Brits. You're not talking about the French. The question,
that's because there is no American politician whose stated goal is to represent Chinese interests or the interest of any other country. I mean, I was watching a debate, US politicians in New York, and part of their questions was about Israel. Who is going to support Israel? Oh, this one was saying this is going to be my third time going to Israel. This is going to be my 100th time going to lick the ass of Israeli politicians, or pray at the wall, so on and so forth, for an election that has to do with New Yorkers. So forgive Tucker Carlson for being quote unquote obsessed with Israel. It is you politicians that have made it so for him to be obsessed with Israel. No one in the US government has a vested interest in promoting, and very, very openly, by the way, of promoting the interest of a foreign nation apart from Israel. You said it, that you went to Congress and part of your agenda was to represent the interests of Israel. And you're asking why a fellow countryman is concerned, and you're asking why he's obsessed.
What about the Jews? What about the Jews?
Oh, I'm an anti-Semite now.
Senator, he has. Now, this is what happens when they are losing the arguments. They immediately pivot to Jews. They immediately try to conflate Jew and Israel, right? They immediately try to say, oh, you are anti-Semitic. Jews, all Jews are Israelis. So if you're attacking Israel, you're attacking the Jewish people, which even attacking the Jewish people isn't anti-Semitic on its own, right? But that's the famous trick that they use. Once you criticize Israel, you're criticizing Jews. No, it's like saying criticizing Saudi Arabia means you're criticizing all Arabs. It makes no sense. Not every Jew is Israeli. Not every Jew supports the Israeli government, or not every Jew likes what Israel is doing. So you're just taking those people, ignoring the diversity within the world Jewish population and community, and just putting them into one box and say they're all Israelis. In essence, making them responsible for whatever Israel is doing. And when people hold Jews who are not Israelis responsible for what Israel is doing, they say, "Ha, see, I told you it wasn't about Israel, it's about Jews, so anti-Semitic. But you made it so. You made Israel's business the business of every Jew. So if Israel is doing something and you have inextricably linked those two together, then you shouldn't be surprised when people are trying to hold Jews responsible for the actions of Israel."
Asking the
You
question,
just
Tucker.
told me.
You're asking, why are the Jews controlling our foreign policy?
Senator,
That's what you just
I am
asked.
hardly saying that, and I have
That is
many
exactly.
Tucker Carlson never mentioned Jew in this conversation. It was you are the one bringing Jew into this conversation. Tucker Carlson has been talking about Israel, 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 Israel. Now he's bringing Jew. He's trying to paint Tucker Carlson as anti-Semitic. That's what he's doing.
What you just said.
Well, actually, I can speak for myself
Good.
and tell you what I am saying.
Good.
On behalf not simply of myself, but on of my many Jewish friends who would have the same questions, which is to what extent, it's interesting you're trying to derail my questions by calling me an anti-Semite, which you are.
I did not.
Of course you are. And rather than be honorable enough to say it right to my face, you
I'm
are
sitting-
in a sleazy feline way implying it, or just asking questions about the Jews. I'm not asking questions about the Jews. There's nothing to do with Jews or Judaism. It has to do with the foreign government.
Isn't Israel controlling our foreign policy? That's not about the Jews.
You said, I'm asking
And by the way,
you.
you're the one that just.
How is that about the Jews? Asking a question about Israel, how is that about the Jews?
Called me, I think, a sleazy feline. So let's be
It's
clear.
sleazy
Yeah, you
to
are.
imply that I'm an anti-Semite, which you just did.
No, I just
When
said, why
I'm
is that the only
asking
question
you-
you're asking? You
you-
answer it. Give
hold
me
on.
another reason.
You-
If you're not an
you-
anti-Semite, give me another reason
I
why
will.
the obsession is Israel.
You see, the thing
I
is
am in
that
no sense.
you have to prove that you're not an anti-Semite. That's it to these guys. It comes with a de facto, or how would I put it? You are anti-Semitic. You're naturally anti-Semitic, so you have to prove that you're not anti-Semitic.
Obsessed with Israel. We are on the brink of war with Iran. And so these are valid questions.
But you're not asking about Iran or
if
the
I can
Ayatollah.
finish, you asked me why I'm obsessed with Israel.
Yep.
3 minutes after telling me that when you first ran for Congress, you elucidated one of your main goals, which
Yes.
is to defend Israel.
Yes.
And I'm the one who's obsessed with Israel.
Yeah. The person asking questions about the foreign government is the one who's obsessed, rather than the person who is representing the interest. Their stated political goal is to represent the interests of the foreign government. Yeah. Very solid logic, right?
I don't see a lawmaker's job as defending the interests of a foreign government, period. Any government, including the ones that my ancestors come from. So that's my position. That does not make me an anti-Semite. And shame on you for suggesting otherwise. And I mean that. And that's low, and you know it's low. So why don't you just answer my questions?
I'll
in a
answer any
straightforward-
question.
Low for politicians. There's nothing is too low for politicians. Politicians all over the world, they're sleazy. They are sleazy. Nothing is too low for them.
rational way. You certainly have the IQ to do it. So-
Shame on you is cute, by the way, Tucker.
It is. It's not cute. I'm offended. I'm obsessed with the Jews. You just told me
You
that
just called me a
ran-
sleazy feline.
It is sleazy to imply that I'm an anti-Semite for asking questions about how my government
You
is
want to
run.
count how many questions you asked about? What about the Jews? What about Israel? What about
I
AIPAC?
never asked about the Jews. I have. This has nothing to do with the Jews.
This is how they gaslight people. This is how they gaslight the world. They just throw in the Jews because that's the magical word that get people scared. Well, people aren't scared of that word anymore. Nah, it doesn't scare anyone anymore to call them anti-Semitic because it's just like the boy who cried wolf. You've overused it. It's meaningless now. So invoking the Jews, probably before if you had just brought in the Jews, Tucker would have, okay, this is a time for me to rearrange this conversation. And it's like, you know what? Bring it on.
Whatever that means. This has to do with a foreign government. And once again, shame on you for conflating the two. They have nothing to do with each other. I'm talking about the influence of
Israel
the
and
foreign-
Jews have nothing to do with each
No.
other?
All Jews, or an attack on all Jews, which I am not, nor would I ever be undertaking. Now, I'm not attacking anybody.
By the
I'm-
way, that's who Iran wants to kill, is all the Jews and all the Americans.
and I'm totally opposed to that. Okay. But now, because
No, at best, Iran wants to kill Israelis, not Jews. Iran has a Jewish population. In case you don't know, the second largest Jewish population in the Middle East after Israel.
Except you don't want to do anything about it.
Decisions need to be made.
We can talk about those decisions.
And I plan to.
Good.
But I just want to get a sense of whether you think, having described yourself as an America First person whose only criterion for judgment on foreign policy is America's national interest, to what extent you're influenced by a foreign government, which gives you a lot of money through its lobby. And you're claiming this has nothing to do with the foreign government. They're not coordinating. Yes, they're spying on us, but it doesn't bother you. And I'm sort of wondering, like, what is this? This is one of the weirdest conversations I've ever had.
I'll tell you what, and I'll answer any question you like, but let's try to...
Are you going to call me an anti-Semite again or no?
Let's try to ratchet down the temperature a little.
You're the one who went to motive. I'm asking honest questions.
I'm
just asking questions. Yes, that's it. That is what I'm doing.
Let's try to ratchet down the temperature a little bit.
Picture the house of your dreams. Maybe it's got an outdoor.
Proud that the NRA supports me? Sure, because people who care about the Second Amendment want to support leaders who fight for it. But it gets it backward. Look, AIPAC, when I ran for the Senate, AIPAC didn't support me. I supported Israel before they supported me. I'm happy to have their support because they share my objective.
No, but you're missing it. I'm not suggesting that you're bought and paid for. I'm not saying that.
I want to go back and take...
sincere.
No, I think he's bought and paid for.
I want to go back and take the transcript because you just said a minute ago, I'm slightly paraphrasing, but are you lobbying for a foreign government because they pay you a lot of money? That's basically what you said. So you are suggesting that.
Let me just be clear about what I think. Your views seem totally sincere.
Yes.
You take money from people who agree with you.
Yeah.
I believe that. I even
take money from people who disagree with me.
I'm only trying to get to the question of to what extent is the U.S. government influenced by other governments? And it's a lot.
Of course.
It's hardly just Israel. It's hardly just Israel. I don't think Israel's the main one. There are lots of governments. China is a massive influence on this city.
And it's a huge problem.
As you know, I couldn't agree more. And there are lots of other. The UK.
When it comes to China's influence, it's a huge problem. He admits it's a huge problem. What with Israel, no, it's not a problem.
Which is a truly sinister place, in my opinion. As a ethnic Brit, I can say. I think that's my view. Maybe you disagree.
I think they're on the wrong path. I love the Brits, but their government
without
has
even
gone
getting
off the
into
rails.
that. I'm just saying I don't think Israel's the only one, but it's the only one where you're instantly called an anti-Semite for asking questions, and it's also the only government that no one will ever criticize. And
People
I find
criticize Israel every minute of every day. Like the only government that people will not criticize, Rashida Tlaib just tweeted out calling Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal.
Rashida Tlaib.
He's a war criminal. There is a warrant for his arrest. He is a war criminal. That's a statement of facts. That's not anti-Semitic.
But no,
you said no one will criticize.
No, I'm talking about Republicans that I would vote for, including you. And I'm saying, whatever. I don't even like talking about Israel. What I care about, I never do because it's not worth being called anti-Semites from AIPAC recipients. But now we are on the verge of joining a war, and I just want to be clear about why we're doing this.
All right. So, and let's get into Iran momentarily, but you suggested it was a strange thing that I said a minute ago that when I came into the Senate, I resolved that I was going to be the leading defender of Israel. And
yeah, it's a very weird, strange political goal for the politician in a country to have as a stated goal defending the interest of a foreign country. Very weird.
What you didn't ask is why. So let me tell you why.
No, you said I was obsessed with Israel, and you had just told me that like your driving motive to get to the Senate was to defend Israel. I'm like, I don't think I'm the one who's obsessed with Israel.
Okay.
I don't even think about Israel.
Tucker, words matter.
Uh-huh.
And you know that. I said I resolved to be the leading defender of Israel. And you said your driving motive, the reason you're in the Senate.
You want to be the leading defender of Israel. I would think if I ran for Senate, I'd be like, there are people dying of drug ODs on the street.
My driving motive is to fight for Texas and America and to fight for jobs and to fight for the Constitution. And you played a very...
And how does Israel come into any of that?
Very careful word game of eliding.
You're the one who said it, not me.
So you still haven't asked why, but I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
And the reason is twofold. Number one, as a Christian, growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of the good.
Now, those are very true Bible words, but it just shows a lack of spiritual understanding to think that those words are referring to the current state of Israel. Nah. If you're a Christian, if you have a basic understanding of Christian theology, you would see the evolution of God's people, first to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, I mean, essentially the Hebrews, to the Israelites, to the Jews, and finally to the Christians. So if you're talking about who the Israel that God Almighty is blessing, sorry, it's not those who reject his son. It's not as a Christian, because he's speaking as a Christian now. So we have to look at it within a Christian framework. It's not those who reject Christ, because the only way to God in the evolution of the Bible and the evolution of Christian theology, the only way to God is via or through Jesus Christ. And what do Jews think about Christ? They reject him, they don't accept him. So what is he talking about? He obviously doesn't understand anything about Christianity.
Those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my. You pull out the phone and use the Google.
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it. And you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology. I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker,
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support it.
No, it comes from ignorance, a misunderstanding of biblical theology. That's where it comes from. You don't understand what the Bible meant.
Israel. But number two,
Hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
And so is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the
God's
descendants of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected.
There is no connection between the ancient kingdom of Israel and the current political entity called Israel in Palestine currently, from a biblical point of view. Absolutely no connection. In fact, when Christ was crucified, something very significant happened in the temple, where the curtain of the temple was ripped in two, which showed a sort of an end to the covenant that God had with the natural Jews. Right, his covenant with people was not based on faith, not based on blood. Right, it wasn't because you became a child of Abraham, you became an inheritor of the promises of Abraham by faith, not by being born as a Jew. Right, there's this famous parable or story that was told in Holy Bible about a king having a wedding ceremony and inviting his family members, inviting his children, and they're refusing to come in. And then he said, you know what? Go out to the streets, go and bring in the strangers, go and bring in the destitute, go and bring them in. You're going to graft them into this family. So those who were privileged to have been God's chosen people but rejected God at a certain point in time, they were cut off. This is Christian theology. This is not secular reasoning. This is literally Christian theology. So the Bible says that Christians are the inheritors of the promise given to Abraham. They are the spiritual Jews. They're not natural Jews. They're spiritual Jews, right? They are the spiritual Israel, the true Israel. One is not a Jew in a spiritual sense because they're born a Jew. One is a Jew in the spiritual sense because of faith, because they believe in Christ, because they believe in God. That's what Christian theology teaches. And Ted Cruz, obviously, I don't know what he was listening to in Sunday school class that he couldn't understand any of that.
But
he's the prime minister,
right?
What?
But just like America is the country run by Donald Trump. No, actually, the American people elected Donald Trump. The same principle.
This is silly. I'm talking about the political entity of modern Israel.
Yes, and that is
believe
Israel.
That's what God was talking about in Genesis.
I do, but
that country's existed since when?
For thousands of years. Now, there was a time when it didn't exist, and then it was recreated just over 70 years ago.
I'm saying, I think most people understand that line in Genesis to refer to the Jewish people, God's chosen people.
That's not what it says.
Okay, Israel, but you don't even know where in the Bible it is. So I don't know if we can.
I don't remember
Sure.
the scriptural citation. But okay,
It's like Genesis 16 or something like that. But yes, it's in the earlier part of the book. But the point is,
all right, Tucker, you keep interrupting me before I finish my sentence.
It's just important to know what you're talking about. I don't know what so you're saying as a Christian, if I believe in Jesus, I have to support the modern state of Israel?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm explaining for me what my vote.
You know how ironic it is that you're supporting a religious group that doesn't even regard your religious belief as anything. That thinks that the central figure in your faith is a criminal, that insults the central figure in your faith. And somehow you think that those differences are reconcilable. How exactly is it reconcilable again? In the Christian faith, no one cometh to the Father but by me. Those were the words of Jesus Christ. No one comes to God except through Jesus Christ. So if you're a Muslim, if you're a Jew, you're a Hindu, if you're whatever religion you are, if you don't believe in Christ, you cannot be an inheritor of the promises given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it is totally idolatrous, if you want to put it in that sense, to support any other religious group that doesn't believe. It's about as I how will I put it? It's about as heretical as claiming that Islam and the Muslim faith and all those things, that you have to support them. They're all Abrahamic religions. We want to look at it. They have similar roots, right? Many of the Muslim prophets, you find them in the Bible as well. But does that mean that we have to support Islam? That Christians have to support Islam as a religion? Not the people. I'm talking about the people now. As a faith? No. You have no obligation whatsoever to support the Jewish faith, to support the Islamic faith, to support the Hindu faith. You have no obligation whatsoever as a Christian to support any of those faiths, because they are heretical, if you want to put it that way.
Motivation is.
But okay, so I'm just trying to understand. You said God tells you to support the modern state of Israel in the Bible, in some place in the Bible that you heard about, but you don't know where it is. That's your theology?
You're going back. Am I a sleazy feline again? I mean,
if you accuse me of anti-Semitism again, I will say that, but I don't think you will.
Try to be a little less condescending. I'm trying to have a conversation.
Condescending. You're throwing this stuff out, and it's my job to figure out what you're talking about. Okay, but I don't understand.
But you're not letting me.
Okay. I'm sorry. I want to be polite.
That is for me a personal motivation, but I also, what I was about to say, I don't believe my personal faith, not everyone who I represent is a Christian. It's not an argument for me to give that we should do this because of my faith. And so as an elected official, I don't give that as the reason we should support Israel. That is a personal motivation for me, but I don't think it is the reason we should.
As an elected official, your personal motivations should take a backseat to that of your constituents. So you're just contradicting yourself, right? This is a personal motivation, and then you should have no say whatsoever in how you run your politics. You're not representing yourself in Congress. You're representing a group of people, the constituents who voted you in. So which is it?
Reason that I am the leading defender of Israel is because Israel is our strongest ally in the Middle East, an incredibly troubled part of the world, and supporting Israel benefits America. And
the reason why you're having trouble in the Middle East is because of Israel. It's not the other way around. And the reason why that place is troubled has a lot to do with, first of all, the carryover of British imperialism, which the US inherited, and now US imperialism. That's why that part of the world is troubled. Partly, not totally. Of course, Islam has its own issues, not exclusively, but partly.
Clearest illustration right now. Can you let me just make this point, and then
and then I'll just ask what you mean. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, Iran, I think the most acute national security threat facing America right now is the threat of a nuclear Iran. I think China is the biggest long-term threat, but acute and
But do you know how stupid that sounds? Do you know how stupid? Nuclear weapons have been shown to be lame duck weapons. They're not very useful. They're not very useful. If you're having, you're having this heart attack over Iran having nuclear weapons, then you should be concerned about a country like North Korea. North Korea has nuclear weapons. They've never used it. They've never attacked the US. They've also chanted death to America and whatever you want to call it. They also have that sentiment and that hatred for America. They've never used it. Russia has nuclear weapons. Russia has been pounded by Ukraine. Russia has not even used nuclear weapons in Ukraine. The only country that has used nuclear weapons is the US. It's it is insane to think that Iran would dare to use nuclear weapons against the US. It is impossible. The Iranian regime may be autocratic, but they are not suicidal. The thing about power, the thing about people in power, even so-called militants and radicals, when they get to power, they want to preserve their power. They want to, they can be as radical as they want when they are not in power. When they're trying to gain power, they can be disruptive. Non-state actors are very unpredictable. But once they gain power, they love life. They love the good things. You think the Ayatollah of Iran doesn't like life? He doesn't like the good things. He doesn't like being in power. Why would he want to jeopardize that by striking US with nuclear weapons? It makes no sense. It's a threat that is not feasible. Never going to happen. Most countries have nuclear weapons as a deterrent, not as an offensive weapon, because you know that once you deploy a nuclear weapon, then there is no going back. There's going to be a response, and it's almost certainly going to be mutually assured destruction. So people are going to nuclear weapons are a lame duck weapon. They are lame duck weapons. If they had any ability to shift the course of any war, Russia would have used it at this point in time to end the war in Ukraine. Do you know how millions of Russians that are dying, that have died because of this war in Ukraine, and Russia has that weapon? They're not even using it. And you think that Iran would dare use a nuclear weapon against the US? The US has thousands of nuclear weapons. It could literally bomb Iran to non-existence if Iran did use one nuclear weapon. And you think that the Iranians are crazy. This is when you're looking at your enemy and think that they are not rational actors. This is the kind of analysis you get. In their own twisted way, they have their own rational, they have their own rationality, and they're not suicidal. They want to live.
near term is a nuclear Iran.
Okay.
And I think Israel is doing a massive favor to America right now by trying to take out Iran's nuclear capacity. And the reason I view Iran differently, we talked before about Iraq. I opposed the Iraq war. We talked about Syria. I opposed military intervention in Syria. The reason for that is those did not pose a threat to the United States. I think Iran is markedly different. Number one, the Ayatollah is a religious zealot. He is a lunatic, but a particularly dangerous kind of lunatic because he's driven by religious fervor. When he says death to America and death to Israel, I believe him.
Now let's look at this statement here he just said. When Israel first attacked Iran, well, first of all, if Iran was that lunatic, they would have been attacking Israel directly. They wouldn't have cared for the consequence if they are suicidal. They would have attacked Israel. Now, when Israel attacked Iran last year, we saw the responses from Iran. They're very limited. They were very mild. In fact, Israel had the last say in that conflict, and Iran sort of, just let it go, because Iran is not interested in having a conflagration with Israel. They're not interested in going to an all-out war. If they were suicidal, even if they couldn't win, they would. But you see what's happening right now. You see how Iran is actually hitting Israel because they've had it up to here. You've pushed the people to the wall, they're going to respond. Iran had all these capabilities all this while. They never used it on Israel. They only use it now because of what Israel did as a defense. And yes, Iran has a right to defend itself. It's not only Israel that has the right or claims that right to say we have a right to defend ourselves. No, Iran has the right to defend itself, and that's what he's doing. And you can see the level of response from Iran. Without the backing of the United States, you Israel cannot stand Iran. Israel cannot stand Iran. So is that the kind of is that the regime that you're thinking you're saying? Of course, it's a religious zealot. Of course. But most religious zealots end up oppressing their own people. That's what happens most of the time. They oppress their people.
And I think Iran is trying to get a nuclear weapon because there is a very real possibility they would use a nuclear weapon. So you want to ask, how does supporting Israel benefit us? Right now, this tiny little country, the size of the state of New Jersey, is fighting our enemies for us and taking out their top military leadership and trying to take out their nuclear capacity. That makes America much safer.
How long does Israel think it can go on with this? It's not a sustainable strategy. Not sustainable. You take out the military leaders, they're just going to be replaced the next day. So what? You bomb their nuclear facilities. What happens in 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now? Now, remember that power doesn't stay in one place forever. US is not going to be the unchallenged world power forever. Israel is not going to be the dominant force in the Middle East forever. What will ensure Israel's survival past when it has all this power is how much relationship it has built, how much goodwill it has built. But when your track record is attacking your neighbors when you were powerful, best be sure that they're going to return that favor when they have the upper hand. So you think that you can just bomb, you think military might solves every problem. It doesn't. You take out the Iranian regime, something else is going to replace it if it survives. Even with Iraq and those other places that are in shambles today, give them time and see how they regroup. So it is not in Israel's best interest. It is not in the interest of the survival of the state of Israel to be this aggressive to its neighbors, to attack. Mind you, you said the state is so small, it's the size of New Jersey. Iran is a big country. Israel is just around 10 million people. Iran is around 100 million people, so 10 times more. Iran's size is much more larger. If there was ever a nuclear configuration between both countries, Iran, as we have seen, has the capacity and the ability to hit Israel. If Israel, of course, Israel has nukes, it would admit to it. If Israel deploys nukes against Iran, you're not going to take out the whole of Iran. But I bet that a few nukes from Iran to Israel will take out the whole of Israel. So it's insane to want to provoke them in this manner.
America first. You want.
And I help, and I.
Oh wow.
I agree with you about McCain. I just want to end by asking you specifically about what's going to happen next in Iran and what should happen next. So you've called for regime change. You said you don't favor the U.S. military participating in any kind of regime change. You said you don't think, and bless you for saying this, that the U.S. military should try and turn it into Belgium.
Yeah.
Thank God. But there is a third option where it turns into Syria, where it's this open wound and it causes massive migration and further destroys Europe, as Syria has.
Yeah.
And that's a huge cost, and where lots of people die and religious minorities get murdered in Syria again. Are you worried about that?
Sure. And listen, that lots of bad things can happen. But going back to what we talked about, the principle of defending America, I agree with President Trump that Iran with a nuclear weapon is an unacceptable risk to America, and we need to stop it. I agree with President Trump, and I'll make a point.
But he's not for regime change.
He's not. So he and I disagree. Yeah, look, I think he thinks it would be better. He has not said he's for it. And you know what? Look, it is consequential when the President of the United States says, I'm for regime change. So I understand why he hasn't. What he has said is he's drawn a red line and said, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, and the only acceptable outcome is complete dismantlement. They have centrifuges. They're enriching uranium right now. They're trying to develop a nuclear weapon. He said they must have complete dismantlement. I led 52 senators, Republican senators, in a letter where we said we agree with President Trump. That's the red line, complete dismantlement. I agree with President Trump. I agree with him supporting Israel, taking out Iran's military leadership, taking out their nuclear capability. And I'll point out, look, if you look the first term, I am hard-pressed to think of a single foreign policy decision Donald Trump made the first term that I disagree with. And that's not entirely accidental, because I spent a lot of time the first term in the Oval Office with him. And what happened
with these things, and they speak, as you do, entirely in moral terms. These people are bad. These people are...
I'm not speaking entirely in moral terms. I'm not interested in killing bad guys. I'm interested in killing people who are trying to kill us.
If we had...
That's different. I'm not engaged in morality.
Are you now? Because you told me that the government of Iran is presently trying to assassinate Donald Trump. And then you
that
said...
is undisputed. There's literally nobody who disputes that fact.
Then why don't you support military action right now against Iran?
We are engaged in military action right now.
Why don't you support offensive military action?
We're bombing the crap out of them. Israel is, and we're supporting them. Israel is.
Okay. So why shouldn't the U.S. military defend its own president? I don't understand that.
Exactly.
Look.
If Iran is such a threat, if Iran is actually trying to take out the U.S. president, then it necessitates direct U.S. military action. But the fact that they are going through Israel shows that that threat is not credible. This is just another lie, hogwash. If Iran trying to take out the U.S. president, in what world is that even possible? Is that even conceivable that Iran would do something like that?
It goes back to...
Because you don't really believe it's true. That's why.
Everyone... Hey, nobody disputes it, Tucker. Did you land on the moon? What other conspiracies do you not believe? Was 9/11 an inside job? I mean, like what?
So I've asked you the names of these people. I don't know the names of the Iranian
hitmen. I know it because the U.S. military and the intelligence agencies have testified before Congress repeatedly.
And what did they say?
That Iran is trying to murder Donald Trump and has hired hitmen. Do I know the name of the hitmen? No, I'm sorry. And I don't think we do either, because we would apprehend them if we knew their names.
Then why don't you take it seriously enough to support killing the Ayatollah in response to protect our president? But you don't. This doesn't even make any sense. And you're calling me an isolationist. If I believed that was true, I would support military action against the government of Iran.
Okay, that's interesting, because there is literally...
You can't kill our president.
All right, out of 535 members of Congress, I am not aware of one who disputes that Iran is trying to murder Donald J. Trump. That's not even the looniest Democrat doesn't dispute that. So
you're essentially saying consensus. So isn't this the argument against the climate change thing, where people say, well, consensus doesn't mean it's true? You're taking consensus between US politicians as evidence, knowing full well that all US politicians are for Israel, and this is what Israel is pushing. It is not inconceivable that they are towing the Israeli line. It's not inconceivable that they are towing the Israel. So a consensus between politicians on an issue doesn't make that issue true.
You're saying if you believed what is, I think, a fact that they are trying.
You think it's a fact?
Yes.
What is the fact exactly?
That they've hired hitmen.
In the United States? Yes. Americans?
Yeah, he's not in Iran. So they haven't hired hitmen.
No, but are the hitmen American?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm telling you what, and by the way, I'm not the CFA.
You don't know, but you are making the assertion.
Hey, I'm not the Department of Defense. I'm telling you what they have told us.
I'm not disputing it. I'm merely saying
we are.
That I'm not. I'm saying the logic train has a massive hole in it. If you believe that's true, then you should, by definition, support killing the people trying to kill our president. But you don't support that.
Now, Tucker,
so I'm wondering what's going on here.
Tucker, you took offense to the word isolationist, and I genuinely don't mean it as a pejorative. I disagree with it. But if you don't like that term, I don't know how else to describe
Okay.
what is a coherent foreign policy that says
I believe
we're
in-
surrounded by two giant nations. By the way, isolationism has long been a school of
I believe
foreign
in
policy.
self-defense. I'm not
Okay, but
I'm not into the slurs, the anti-Semite stuff. I just don't like that. I'm telling you what I believe.
So, but is there a single military action Trump took that you agree with? So, do you agree with taking out General Soleimani?
Oh, I don't know. It turned out better than I thought. I guess.
I mean, you said at the time it would lead us to World War III.
I thought I was worried about it. I've seen that.
Well,
happen.
but that proved not the case.
I was wrong, as I have been many times.
Did you agree with taking out the ISIS caliphate?
But well, if we took out the ISIS caliphate, why are they running Syria right now? And you're for that. Why is that?
What do you mean? I didn't say I'm for that.
You don't seem to have a problem with it.
I didn't
that
say
ISIS
that.
is now running Syria. You're like, we'll see.
No, I look,
I mean, I know why.
By the way,
I know
didn't
why.
push
You don't
Assad
care.
out. Assad toppled.
It's hilarious.
You
It's
know
like
why I don't
Assad
care?
is bad, but no, ISIS runs Syria, but that's fine. We'll just kind of wait and see on ISIS. Not a big.
The US has the track record of replacing a terrible regime with another terrible regime, just like replacing the Taliban with the Taliban. Now they're replacing Assad with ISIS. Yeah, very good.
deal.
You know
Not a big
why?
deal. They're trying to kill Trump.
Hold on a second. I want to get back. So, you know why I don't care, and why? And you do your trademark smirky laugh. I know
Well,
why
what are
you don't
even
care.
talking about?
What? Why don't I care?
I don't know why. You tell me. Because you think it's okay because they're not making angry noises or something. But by your own standards, ISIS is so immoral that they must die. But now they're running Syria, and you don't think that we should take military action against the government of Syria because why? They're ISIS.
What I said is I don't know how good or bad it'll be. Look, I wasn't pushing Assad out. He fell. He fell on his own, in part because he was heavily supported by Hezbollah. And when Israel took out the Hezbollah leadership, he lost his base of support.
But the current ISIS leadership, you don't think is bad? You can't say it's terrible that ISIS runs a country?
I am concerned about it.
Concerned? Aren't you horrified?
I want to see what they do.
But so you got a wait and see attitude on ISIS now?
On the government of Syria, they are not actively, that I am aware of, trying to murder Americans. And that's a real dividing line. Are you trying to murder Americans or not?
I'm just saying it's a little weird that we waged this war against ISIS and now they're running a country in the Mediterranean. I think that people would be very, very upset about that. But you don't seem
By the
very
way,
upset about that.
did you agree with Trump taking out al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS?
I'm totally opposed to ISIS. And what I care about is results, actually. And if taking out the head of ISIS ends ISIS, I guess I'm for it. But now ISIS runs Syria.
Okay,
so I'm wondering how does this work?
I mean, my point is...
At the time, I mean, I've taken so many different positions over the years, some of which have been wrong. I really do my best to be honest and correct if they are and admit that I was wrong. I'm not one of these people who's like, I've always been consistent. No, my views change all the time because the facts change all the time. You're not going to get consistency from me. You're only going to get sincerity.
Well, I will say this. And look, I believe you're sincere.
Yeah.
But...
I'm not God. I'm just some guy watching, trying to figure out the right thing for America.
And I think because you believe you were mistaken, and I agree previously, I think you've overcorrected.
Overcorrected. I'm worried about turning this mess in Iran into a much larger mess. That's the concern. And
by the way, that's a reasonable worry. Look,
I know it's reasonable. And I know you've been you're ready to call me all these names for asking, you're just asking questions. Yes, I am. So here's my question to you. If the Ayatollah is killed in Iran, and he very well
could if there's a war.
I have just read in the paper this morning that Israel tried to take him out twice, and Trump told them not to.
I have read that. I don't have independent confirmation one way or the other.
Do you think that they should take him out?
So I actually talked about it. As you know, I do a podcast every week, Verdict with Ted Cruz, and I actually talked about it in the latest podcast. And I said, look, I've seen the reporting that says that Trump asked them not to take out the Ayatollah. And what I said in the podcast is I think it's reasonable for them to decide not to try to take him out. What they've done is targeted just about the entire top level of the military, the people that actually conduct the war. I can see an argument that taking out both...
So, Iran planning to take out the US president, not in an overt sense. No, this is just a claim by the US government. Is such an inconceivable thing. That's it. An independent country, just as equal as the US in the international scene, is inconceivable. But the US can decide, like the US president can decide, like he's God, whether or not to take out the leader of a foreign country, to essentially assassinate the leader of a foreign country. Does anyone see the double standards here, or do I need to point it out? That the US government can decide, oh, it's time for us to kill the president, to kill the leader of a foreign country.
The head of state and a religious leader could make him a martyr and could cause more problems than it's worth. And by the way, if you take out the Ayatollah, I don't know that the next guy isn't just as bad. And so I am.
What happens to the country?
I don't know, but you mentioned before, I want to go back to this. You said something like, you, like most other politicians, are engaged in moral terms. And let me be clear, I am talking about national interest. I am talking about protecting America. So there are bad guys on planet Earth that I don't think we should take out, even though they're bad guys.
Good.
I'll call them bad guys, but I'm not willing to use U.S. military force to take them out.
All right. Yeah. I think Toko did a great job. He was very snarky. He was dismissive at times, but I think it was worth it. It was worth him having this sort of conversation with Ted Cruz, just exposing his ignorance and exposing the double standards when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. I mean, if you think that it is a credible threat, that the Iranians pose a credible threat to the life of the US president, then you would be invading Iran right now. But the fact that you're not doing it shows that it's hogwash, shows that that's just a line being fed by the Israelis, who have claimed for 30 years that Iran is 2 weeks away from having a nuclear bomb. Iran that has subjected itself to international scrutiny, international organizations to monitor its nuclear programs. Israel isn't. Iran signed the non-nuclear proliferation treaty. Israel hasn't. Israel has. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. Israel has. Wouldn't admit to it. Wouldn't deny it, but they do have. So who is the real threat here, right? It goes both ways, but this is what you see when certain countries think that they are better than other countries, that they have a right to determine the outcome of any government that they feel like in the world. And I keep saying this: power doesn't stay in one place forever. The US isn't going to be the most powerful nation on earth forever. Israel isn't going to be the most powerful nation in the Middle East forever. In fact, it isn't currently. It's just seems that way because of US support. And when all that ends, then what determines the survivability of Israel is how much friends it has in that region, not how many enemies it has made. So that's all for the stream. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you in another live stream. It's bye for now.